Hey everyone! Alright, today's video is going to be over angle relationships. Your learning target. I will be able to use angle relationships to write equations and solve for missing angle measures. So let's go ahead and review the vocabulary. So first we have a straight line, and the main thing you want to remember about any straight line is that it's going to measure 180 degrees. Right angles measure 90 degrees. Acute angles measure less than 90 degrees. And obtuse angles measure more than 90 degrees. Parallel lines are lines that are never going to intersect. So these lines could go on and on forever and they are never going to cross paths. Intersecting lines are lines that do cross each other. And then perpendicular lines are intersecting lines, but they intersect at a right angle. So that means this is a right angle. So is this, and this, and this. Those are all right angles. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the different angle relationships that we're going to see. So I'm going to start in the bottom left. We have complementary angles. So complementary angles are any two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. For example, 30 degrees and 60 degrees, that would be a pair of complementary angles because they have a sum of 90. Now supplementary angles are any two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. For example, 135 degrees and 45 degrees would be supplementary because their sum is 180 degrees. All right, let's go up here to the very top and talk about vertical angles. So vertical angles are two angles that are across from each other on intersecting lines. So let me draw some intersecting lines. So let's look at this angle right here. Across from this angle would be this angle. Now these are going to be congruent. They're going to have the exact same angle measurement. So this angle would be congruent to this angle. So remember, vertical angles, those are just the angles across from each other. Now adjacent angles are angles that are next to each other. So let's say that we have angles A, B, and C. So A and B would be adjacent angles because they're next to each other and they share a common side. Angle B and angle C would also be adjacent. They're right next to each other and they share a common side. However, notice how angle A and angle C would not be adjacent. They're not next to each other, and they also do not share a common side. All right, and last, we have a linear pair. So linear pair is two angles that are adjacent, so they're right next to each other, and they're supplementary. So remember, supplementary means they're going to have a sum of 180 degrees, and that forms a straight line. So for example, and I'm going to use the same pair that I used here. So let's say that we have an angle measurement of 135 degrees and 45 degrees. Since those add up to 180, it's forming a straight line. So that kind of comes from the words linear pair. You have a pair of angles that are forming a line, and they add up to 180 degrees. All right, so let's apply what we have just learned about angle relationships, and let's solve for the missing angles within these intersecting lines. So let's look at what's been given to us. So we have 50 degrees right here. Now, I want to use that information, and let's apply what we know. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's apply what we know about vertical angles to solve here. So if this is 50 degrees, then I know that if I go directly across, this angle is going to be congruent, and it is also going to be 50 degrees. So we can say that angle D measures 50 degrees. So I'm going to do the same thing on this angle. So if this measures 40 degrees, if I go directly across, I know that this is also going to measure 40 degrees because vertical angles are congruent. So angle B would measure 40 degrees. Now, I'm going to look at this line right here. Remember that every line measures 180 degrees, so that means 50 plus 40 plus some number is going to equal 180. So if I were to add 50 and 40, I would get 90. And let me write this out for you. So I know that angle A plus 40 plus 50 equals 180. 40 and 50 make 90. So angle A plus 90 would equal 180. And if I subtract 90 from both sides, then that's telling me that angle A equals 90 degrees. So I'm going to fill that in. So this would be 90 degrees. And I'm going to use what I know about vertical angles and come across. So I know angle C also measures 90 degrees. Now, I do want to point out that this picture is not to scale. Obviously, angle A and angle C, they do not literally measure 90 degrees, but for the sake of the problem, just bear with me. Okay, sometimes we are going to have angle relationships and we're going to be missing angle measures, but they're going to give us variables instead. So what we want to do is we want to identify what angle relationship we have. Then we want to set up an equation. We want to solve it, and then we want to plug it back in to find the angle if needed. For example, example 1, we have a right angle, and we have two angles that form that right angle. So these are complementary angles. So again, complementary angles add up to 90 degrees. So that means 3x plus 2x equals 90 degrees. Let me go ahead and separate this out. So I'm going to combine like terms. 3x plus 2x would be 5x. And then I'm going to divide by 5 on each side. 5 would go into 9 one time with 4 left over, and 5 would go into 48 times. So x would equal 18. And then if your problem asked, what does like this angle measure right here? Well, if x is 18, 2 times x would be 36 degrees. So that would be 36, and then 3 times x would be like 3 times 18, and that would be 54 degrees. Example 2. Okay, example 2, if we look at these angles, we notice that they are directly across from one another. So we have vertical angles. Vertical angles are congruent. So that means that 5x plus 3, and let me change my color here. That means that 5x plus 3 is equal to 53 degrees. And then we would solve from there. So I'm going to subtract 3 from each side. So 5x equals 50. And then if we divide both sides by 5, x would equal 10. And then what we would want to do is plug this back in and make sure it works out. So if we had 5 times 10 plus 3, that would be 50 plus 3, and that is equal to 53, so we know that we have the correct value for x. Okay, now it is time for you to try. So you're going to find angle WCX. So keep in mind with the angle WCX, that would be like this angle right here. And then you're going to find the angle measure for XCY. So you would start here at X, and then go to C, and then go to Y, and you're solving for that angle measure as well. All right, make sure you have everything written down, and we will see you next class day.